Hello and welcome to Midweek Matters. In Midweek Matters this week, we will turn our attention to the Government of India's decision to privatize Vizag Steel Plant, Vishakha Ukku. We will try and put it in the larger context of the government's intent to embark on a massive privatization program. We will ask questions and challenge some of the assumptions behind this privatization drive that the government wants us to accept as an economic reform program. Vizag is restless. Steel plant workers and general public are storming the streets to protest against the union government's decision to sell off the public sector undertaking. Every political party and civil society organization, except of course the BJP and its ally Janasena, are opposing the move. Civil society in Andhra Pradesh is angry, anxious and concerned about the development. The Andhra Pradesh Chief Minister has written to the Prime Minister asking him not to go ahead with the privatization of the steel plant. It is natural for workers of any PSU to be angry at a bid to privatize their unit. But Vizag Steel is different in many ways. It is not the concern merely of the workers of the plant. The entire civil society is alarmed over the central government's announcement. It is not just land, brick, mortar and machinery like in any other industry. It was won after a prolonged struggle by the entire people of the state. 32 people laid down their lives from all parts of the then united Andhra Pradesh for its establishment. There were fasts unto death, police action, strikes, prolonged agitation, resignations by MLAs and MPs, real resignations, unanimous resolution by the State Assembly, eyeball to eyeball confrontation with the centre. Vizag Steel Plant symbolizes the victory of Telugu people over the adamant central government then headed by the mighty Indira Gandhi. Sadly, now the ruling party at the centre seems to be pitifully challenged in its ability to understand this emotive aspect. Their apparatchiks in the state know this background, but they have no courage to stand up and to speak up on behalf of the people of the state. I am not trying to say that for emotive reasons, Vizag Steel should be left alone and not privatized. No, that's not my contention. My concern is much larger. My intention today is to interrogate the way the government is packaging the privatization drive, challenge the wisdom of this move, raise questions about its larger theoretical premises, and air my anxieties about its practical implementation by the current government, especially given its record of patronage to a few oligarchs. The government, the pink papers, and several corporate honchos want us to believe that the budget 2021-2022 is a game changer. Not for anything else, just for its decision to sell off public sector undertakings. They want us to believe that this is a bold reform move. The stock market rose, it salivated at the prospect of large-scale transactions of buying and selling. Modi government wants us to believe that selling PSUs, not reforming them, just selling is reform. Decamping is reform. The Prime Minister recently declared in a webinar, the government has no business to be in business, as though it was a moment of penny drop for him, an epiphany. He must not have known that his speechwriters repurposed some lines from the old speeches of Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher from the 1980s. And those leaders, in turn, took the idea from the works of Friedrich Hayek and Milton Friedman. That economic philosophy is unabashedly clear. Help the rich and their investments will produce jobs and prosperity for everyone else. Business is for making short-term profits. Never mind, even if less than 10% own more than 90% of a nation's wealth. But fortunately, that economic theology is now increasingly under fire. It resulted in rapacious behemoths exploiting both labor and environment and sponge on natural resources doled out by the corrupt politicians cheaply. However, there is an alternative. Help the middle class and the lower income sections. Their purchasing power will power an economy towards an unprecedented and sustained growth. If this is not Atmanirbhar in economic philosophy, then I wonder what else is. Gandhiji would agree, Sardar Patel would agree, Deen Dayal Upadhyay would agree. Let's leave Pandit Nehru alone. The world has come around to this. $1.9 trillion stimulus announced last week by US President Biden is in line with this thinking. Not with that of Reagan, Thatcher, Fayek and Friedman. There were days when it was fashionable to sneer at public sector, to stigmatize it as inefficient, to portray private sector as a paragon of virtue and efficiency. But you see, metadata from across the globe don't support this fancy prejudice. In India, only the top 100 large private companies do well. It is beyond dispute that the largest non-farm NPAs are in the private sector. Also keep in mind that during the last 5 years, fixed capital formation in the private sector has fallen to 23.4% from 26.1%. And there you go. So much for the efficiency of private sector. Evidence surely doesn't support the slandering of public sector. Take a look at the bourses. At least 8 public sector undertakings are all-time favorites there. Well, no one quarrels with the need to further improve the efficiency of PSUs. Some of them are hopelessly inefficient. But so are many private sector units. Some PSUs need deep-cut reforms, not sale. Reform is heavy lifting. Sale is a lazy option for the government. Reform their governance. Appoint professionals to manage them, not babus. Eliminate government interference. Such reform increases the efficiency of the state enterprises. Sale has a risk of creating monopolies, oligarchs, crony capitalists. It can distort our democratic polity. We don't have to look farther than Russia to understand what could be the nature of threat to democracy. Or even closer at home, at the opaqueness of the electoral bonds and the disproportionate advantage the ruling party had in gathering them and garnering them. One doesn't forget the government's eagerness to support, not long ago, a company which didn't have experience even to make toy planes, to make warplanes. Those skeptical about the possibility of PSU efficiency can take a look at this scene in Singapore. The state-owned enterprises there do exceedingly well. They're large too, even South Korea. Or take China. Last year, there are more enterprises in the Fortune 500 list from China than from any other part of the globe. America is behind China on this score, and a large number of those enterprises are state-owned. Let's stop soapboxing about inefficiency of public sector. They can be made efficient. Reform is the need, not sale. Offload some stake, by all means if you want to, but why outright sale? The Prime Minister said that the government's focus should be on the welfare of society and policies related to people. To him, it is misusing the talent of officers to keep them in the business of operation of public entities. But the point is, who is forcing the government to keep its officers tied down to managing public entities? Professionalize their management. Let officers do government work. Who is stopping you, Prime Minister? The PM sounded as though the thousands of migrant laborers were unattended to and uncared for because scores of government officers were languishing on shop floors, busy managing PSUs. PM said he wants to use the proceeds from sale of PSUs to enhance rural connectivity, supply safe drinking water, and make provisions for cheap housing. Isn't there someone around him who can tell him that efficiently run PSUs will give the government money every year, year after year, to do all these and much more? The government has a hopelessly weak case for privatization. It stretches the definition of reform beyond recognition. It makes no economic sense. It will spell doom for our democratic fabric if a few cronies are favored in this flea market sort of sale. Remember the reports from January this year, when Niti Aayog, Finance Ministry, and the Competition Commission raised red flags over concentration of power in India's corporate world with regard to ports, airports, telecom, and pharma? But they were overruled, and some companies were favored. That's the danger, a real danger lurking in the bushes. A secretary in the Finance Ministry said, India is in a position where it must be less sentimental about PSU sales. It is such unelected bureaucrats and some unelectable politicians who show how insensitive the central government is to the emotions and sentiments of the people of Andhra Pradesh. The state got a very raw deal during bifurcation in the division of assets and liabilities. Special category status, which was promised on the floor of the parliament and during the election campaign, was denied. Andhra Bank was vaporized. And now there is an attempt to pick our pockets, to steal from us the Vizag Steel. This entire saga shines an unforgiving light on the cold-blooded copycat economic philosophy of this government, on its voodoo economics, on its indecent haste and questionable intent to sell valuable public assets to a few chosen beneficiaries. In the case of Vizag Steel, our rulers should know that people can be emotional about industries too, not just about mandirs. That's all we have time for this week. We will meet again next week, Wednesday, lunchtime at 1 o'clock. Stay safe and take good care of yourselves. Until then,